and it's not often that I do an evening video, but the weather tonight is lovely and it's quiet, and I thought I'd get around and give you a view of the plot in July. So this is the July Allotment Tour, and we'll kick off with the courgettes. And I've got two varieties of courgettes. The one that my neighbour gave me, which is a darker fruit, and we've had a few off of there, but the bulk of these are this striped courgette, and we've been picking these really small because of course when a courgette gets too big it turns into a marrow really, and we tend not to be able to use them very effectively. So our philosophy this year is use them while they're small. So a little bit bigger than that, but isn't it a beautiful structure, that fantastic flower on the end of that fruit. And these have been pretty good for us already, and I'm sure we'll get lots and lots more courgettes or zucchini off of these. Swinging around to the red currants. Now, we've had a great session of red currant picking and the jams are in the pot, but there's still an awful lot of berries on these bushes. Just tuck you in there and show you what's left in here. It's just masses and masses and masses. So we'll be using those in a week or so's time. We'll start picking those and putting them into the freezer, and then we can add them to crumbles and yogurts in the winter, various dishes where we basically just take the frozen fruit out and use it in the dish. So there's really another good picking to be had off of these. Now, where the garlic came out, we've got an empty bed at the moment, and I'm going to get the rest of the broad beans out, which is the final sowing of broad beans. And there's still quite a few in there for picking, and they've been really, really nice beans this year. So we'll have those out, and then this whole bed up to this point will be purple sprouting broccoli. And I sowed the purple sprouting broccoli in June, and it's in the polytunnel, and it should be just about ready to come out and be planted up as I take the broad beans out. And this of course is the swede that I put in where the earliest of the garlic that I harvested. And if we have a look, we can see really nice roots developing, and they're coming on nicely, ready for the winter months, and we'll look forward to having those. And the turnips that I sowed just this week hopefully will be ready at the same time so that we can add both to stews. The next bed along here is a few broccoli, which I put in because I had a few failed brassicas, and they're coming on nicely. They should be ready in a week or two. But the main story in this bed is the parsnips, and the foliage is the best I've ever had. I don't know whether that's going to transfer into the best roots that I've had. Well, time will tell. But as you can see, I used that toilet roll method, and there they are. And it's certainly got a hold without any problem at all, and looking like we'll have a reasonable crop. So excited for those. And the runner beans are really densing up now. Just noticed some black fly on there, which I don't normally get on runner beans, so I have to keep an eye on that. I think I'm going to pinch that one out straight away, but the rest of it looks fine. And we've got mainly the white flower, which is Czar, and that bean's particularly valuable because the beans inside the pods can be kept over winter and dried as pulses. But we've also got a few of the red flowers in there, which are probably seed that I got mixed up in the packets, but that's fine. A few marigolds on the end come into flower now, which is nice to see. And of course I've got this pumpkin munchkin pot here, which has got a lot of flowers on it, and I planned to put this up on the water container so that I didn't get any slug damage, but I'm actually not seeing any slug damage at all. A couple of dried leaves here, which I think I'll remove, but it's doing well, and I keep feeding and watering that, and hopefully we'll get some small pumpkins that we can roast in the oven. The other thing with this runner bean bed, you may have seen in my earlier videos, I put a line of leeks down in the middle and they've all stood up now. They're doing well, and hopefully we'll have that first crop of leeks when the beans come down at the end of their season. And they're next to the main leek bed, which I've weeded a couple of times and it's doing nicely, and I can see a real thickening up of the stems now, and that's always good to see because it means we're going to have a good meaty crop. And there's some nice thick leeks forming in here, so good news on the leeks. My picking pots are pretty much over now. The rocket has gone to seed. Coriander's just surviving, but we've got some more sown for in the polytunnel for later on in the season. And the parsley we've been using, and it's been good. And of course we've got this rogue squash or pumpkin in that pot, which I'm just allowing to carry on. It's getting very dry in here, and it's been a real battle for water. You get a couple of days of real warmth and you think, shall I water all over the plot? And then you get rain forecast, and that's exactly as it is tomorrow. We've had 2 days of rain, and then we've got a spell of dry, and that's okay. That just saves us all watering our plots excessively, but you do get these dry moments in between showers. The dahlias here are spectacular, and in the last couple of days this variety has come out, and just take a look at that head. It's a beautiful plant, and I've never been a big dahlia keeper, but this encourages me and motivates me to get a few more because they're so easy, and these have stayed in the ground all winter. I've just covered over that tank so that the hard frost doesn't get them, and then just take the perspex cover I had on the tank off at the beginning of the spring, and Bob's your uncle. Of course the dahlias are right next to the pear tree, and the pears have got this tinge of red on them. They look lovely, and up in the tree there you can see there's a fair few fruit, and I've never thinned these out, and based on the success last year I'm not going to thin these either. It does look like the tree's got a good quantity of fruit on it, so I'm looking forward to that. In my raised beds I've had a great deal of success, some failures. I've noticed this year I've suffered an awful lot from broccoli going to seed, and you can see it in action right there. And to some extent, you know, I've taken the main head out, and this is a reaction to that. But I seem to have had more of that occur this year than I have in previous years. And I've got the same going on over here, where one of them has just gone to seed, or at least started to flower, and then will go to seed. So I need to be careful that I don't have too many going that way. The heads are not huge. You can see this one, it's okay. It's reasonable size, but by no means massive. So again, it's about using those at the right time and being realistic about how large they're going to get. The cabbage is suffering a little bit from slug damage, but they're looking good and well-hearted, and we'll soon be getting to the point where we take some of those out. My pots of flowers have been relatively successful. These calendula have been nice, but nowhere near as good as the ones I put in the larger beds. The other pots, the cosmos, it was earlier than the rest of the cosmos, so that was nice to have, but it's now going to seed, and I'm going to keep some of this seed because I've really enjoyed these flowers. And as you can see, if you just touch that head, you've got a handful of seed which we can save and grow on next year, and that's what I'm going to be doing rather than buy new. The sweet peas, on the other hand, that I put in the pots have been a bit of a disappointment, and it may well be my own fault. And there's a bit of weed in here, just shows how I'm not on top of the weeding, but they've stayed very low to the surface. I didn't stake them, and therefore we haven't had an awful lot of flowers or success from that pot. The other beds has been the shallots, and I've definitely got a little bit of white rot in here, but the shallots have been a fantastic size, and we're just using them straight out of the bed, and we're not looking to keep any of these on the basis that I have had that white rot. These other onions, the Ryansburger long keeping onion and the Elsa Craig that I planted, are just getting bigger and bigger, and I think they're going to be the onions that we store for the season of winter. So this is another Swede bed, and was planted a bit later, but just look at the size of those. Fantastic. I think we're going to have a really good crop of Swede this year, and I've interspersed in there with some spring onions which we're pulling from time to time. The beetroot that I've grown outdoors will make our second batch of beetroot for beetroot chutney, which we really love, and we've been taking a few out as they get a bit larger, and they are really nice. And this variety, which I think is 0, is a lighter beetroot, almost a pale pink, but tastes exactly the same. Turnips, we almost harvested all of the white Milan turnips, and there's one really good sized one in there, but we'll be clearing this out soon and moving on to the purple turnips, which are just enormous. So they're going to make some good stews, and we'll have that second tranche of turnips coming along for the autumn in not too distant future. Now, those of you that watch my videos regularly will know that I've put a lot of care into growing these Celeriac, and I'm really pleased with how they're coming along. You can really see the roots forming now on these plants. The bed needs another weed, and that's going to be a job for the middle of next week, but the foliage is good and strong. The spacing, I think, on these plants this year is really helping because the light's getting to them and the roots are forming, and that's really good news. And right next to it is the Nantes 2 carrots that I put into some fairly old compost, and we're just going to use these for small carrots, and I can see down there that they're forming nicely. So I won't touch those too much because we don't want to attract the good old carrot root fly. And of course there's some more Celeriac, and this is Monarch on the left and Prinz on the right, and again they're forming roots really nicely, and I can't see a great deal of difference between the two, but we'll test the taste in good time. So one thing that I've not seen up until tonight has been the head of any Romanesco, and I looked tonight as I was going around doing this video, and in there I can see one forming, and they're a fantastic structure, and I'm really pleased to see that I've had at least one succeed. The other thing in here, which is absolutely amazing, is the size of that one brassica, and I think that is a cauliflower, and whether it's going to just form to be a massive cauliflower or not, I don't know, but it's certainly very big in foliage terms, so we will see. Now the cow went in quite late, and it's taken a hold quite nicely. You'll notice the lower leaves have been attacked like mad for slugs, but the new younger growth, which seems to be getting away without any problem at all, and I think I'll end up taking off those lower leaves and just making sure that the good fresh leaves continue. I kept the one cabbage in here which will eventually go to the chickens, And then this is a bed of broccoli, and as you can see, it's a bit disappointing. Lots of small heads, and we've been cropping those, but pretty much consistent with most of the broccoli this season. Doesn't seem to have done the best. And where we've taken the broccoli heads off, I just need to pull out the rest of the plant, because it doesn't seem like we're going to get too much secondary growth of heads on these plants. And next to it is the sprouts, and they look like they're bushing up really well, and I think I'm getting very close to needing to stake those, because I don't want a repetition of last year's falling over of the sprouts. So the polytunnel has served me well so far this season. I've now taken down the strawberries, which has resulted in an awful lot more light in here. I'm hoping that that's going to help the aubergines develop. And the aubergines got some good flower growth on them. I've yet to see a fruit, but I'm hopeful that the pollinators have been in here and we'll get fruit very soon. This is probably the oldest flower, and it's certainly dying back, and I'm hoping that that will develop into a fruit. Not having grown aubergines before, I can't be absolutely sure. This bed is now had the salad crops taken out of it in the main. There's a few bolted lettuce still to take, but they'll be coming out very soon. It'll take me a few minutes to clear through this and get the surface ready for the next crop that's going to go in there, which is the coriander, which I have sown just this week. So hopefully that will come through and be transferred into that bed, ready for some late season coriander. Tomatoes, whilst looking a bit crinkly and dried up, and I don't know, a bit poorly, I do seem to have a really strong crop of tomatoes on them. So no complaints really. There's more flowers to develop into fruit, but there's a goodly amount of fruit on them, and particularly these money makers have some really nice trusses on them, and that tomato over there is a really good size. So just keep going with those, keep watering them, taking care of them, and I think I might end up tying up the top of the stems one more time, just so that we don't get any lean out. And over there in the jungle is the beefsteak, and as you can see, tons of flowers and a few fruit starting to form. And I have topped these out, taken out the growing tips, because I just don't want them to grow any higher, and I'm going to have to make some decisions about whether I remove some trusses and some fruit. You can see in there one of the fruit developing nicely, and each one of these is a different variety, and be interesting to watch. But we're getting to the point where they're starting to fruit up, and yeah, I'm excited about beefsteak tomatoes. Now the peppers have done fabulously in terms of growth, and we've had a few peppers off them which have been fabulous tasting peppers, and we've got lots more flowers forming now, and hopefully that means that we're going to get that second surge of fruit. And yeah, there's just tons of flowers, and I'm really encouraged by that. And so I'm anxious to get space in amongst these now. So Mrs. K is going to take the basil and make the basil cubes that we mix with oil, and she's going to put those in the freezer ready for using in dishes in the months to come. So we'll soon be getting the various basils out of here, and in terms of my basil tasting video, I'm happy that they're all pretty successful, and we'll be using all of them. I noticed there tonight they go into flower, so now's definitely the time. Quick peek over there, you can see some other varieties of the peppers. So as I said, in here I've got purple sprouting broccoli, which is getting near to the point where I either pot it on or pot it out. There's 7 pots there of probably 3 or 4 seeds per pot. So that's coming along nicely for that moment when I need them in that garlic bed. This is my seed sown thyme and sage. We've got the orange thyme on the left hand side and the thyme de Provence on the right hand side. That's the cooking thyme, or supposedly really strong flavoured cooking thyme. And then this is white sage, and I'm looking forward to those getting a bit larger. I can see that I need to pull out the pots that have not been successful now and just focus a bit on the plants that are doing well. Now, my first season of growing carrots in a deep raised bed is looking hopeful. You notice I've got some bindweed in here. I keep taking it out, but without really disturbing the carrots. I just have to live with it a bit and take what I see away. Unfortunately, I think there's probably quite a bit growing down below. But in terms of the carrot, if we get in here and have a look, we can see that there's some quite reasonable carrots developing. I'm hoping that they're going to be nice and long because of the depth in the bed. Time will tell. And there's one giant there, but it does seem a bit misshapen. So yeah, jury's out, but I'm hopeful. So that's about it in the polytunnel. There's a few odds and sods around. There's some apple mint, which we're enjoying. And we've got this chrysanth, which is a bit early flowering, but then it would be in this heat. So we'll soon be pulling him out to enjoy the flowers, I think. And down in here, we've got a couple of Caballero Nero style kale that were spare. And a friend or a local plot owner gave me this melon, which is certainly flowering and looks like it's got a fruit on, but I can't see us making a meal out of it yet. Well, good morning. It's the next day. The videoing had to come to a fairly abrupt stop, as 1 or 2 people wanted to come on and talk on the allotments, but that's fine. That's what happens on allotments, and it's great to have the community. So I thought I'd finish this off this morning. I was going to show you the beans, and we've got the gigantes, which are living up to their name, and the tendrils are getting pretty high. I've not topped these out yet. They seem to be sort of staying at that level. They've got a lovely large white and cream flower. No beans on there yet. And here we have the Belotti beans, the climbing version. Again, flowers, but smaller. And probably one of the first beans there. So it'll be interesting to see them come through. The cannellinis are doing well. And we do have a few small beans forming in there. And it'll be interesting to see those develop over the next few days and weeks. And there's some more there. We're getting quite a few beans on that particular variety. And then these are the dwarf Belottis. And you can see on these the characteristic red flecking on the beans. So all of these beans seem to be coming through okay. And we'll see how the actual formation of the bean carries along. Looking forward to that. Now, my potato crop has done really well. And it's just getting to the point now where the leaves are dying off and the plants are falling over, and that should mean that we've got a really strong crop of potatoes underneath, and we'll be taking those out in the not too distant future. The black currants have had their season, in all honesty. We've made blackcurrant jam. And now we've just got dense foliage, a few black currants in there. But the birds have finished those off, which is absolutely fine. My sunflowers I've been really pleased with. Some beautiful heads on these, and they characteristically bend over when they get to this size. But that's been a really nice flower, and this one is that much more prolific in terms of its flowers. Had one main central head, which the petals have died off now and exposed where the seed's going to form. But around it we've got all these smaller heads, which is really nice to see. And then this one is just about to lose its petals, I think, but is beautiful nonetheless. And this is the tallest of the sunflowers that I've grown. We've eaten well with jostaberries. Again, there's a few more in here, but we've had the main crop from them, and we'll use what's left probably just to go in the freezer, but there's probably not more than a couple of cupfuls to be had. And the dreaded bindweed is taking its toll in here, along with some stinging nettles, so there's quite a lot of sorting out to do inside and underneath those bushes. Now, up onto the top areas, you can see ahead of us a flower bed, which I've shown in a couple of videos. It's been a real success. Now we've had 2, 4, 6, 8, I think there's 10 goldfinches there feeding off of the feeder. But no, the bed has been a real success. The flowers have met our expectations, and it's been real fun to grow that bed. And the fruit in the fruit garden, we haven't had a tremendous amount of gooseberries, and the plants now are just really focusing on leaf growth, and that'll make sure that they're good and strong for the winter and hopefully next season. What has been an absolutely fantastic crop has been the rhubarb, and I've seen this rhubarb sort of come and go during the course of the season, with some of the plants almost dying back after I'd replanted them, and then coming through in these tremendous stems with huge leaves. And we're cropping this on a fairly regular basis, but there's so much more to be had from those, and that's the early varieties, and over here the later varieties, which are equally as huge, and as we crop them just seem to keep on coming. So the rhubarb, as far as I'm concerned, has been a great success. You will probably have seen me thin out the apples a week or so ago, and I'm already seeing the benefits of that. Some of these single apples I've left are getting a reasonable size, and that's the whole objective. The apples on here were too small last year, and so this thinning process, I'm hopeful, will help to give us a better crop. Time will tell, but it's an interesting process. I'm learning, and hopefully it'll result in more apples. I noticed at the top there where I couldn't really reach, the density of apples is much more intense. We'll see how they do versus the ones that I've managed to thin out. I'll show you quickly the mystery bush. It's getting really overgrown in here now. It's a really tough time of year to keep on top of this, when the bindweed really starts to kick in and any stinging nettles that I've not managed to get out really start to flourish. This will probably be an autumn job now. But in here, on the mystery bush, we've got rather nice large fruit, and I'm thinking loganberry, something of that sort of family. Wait to see it colour up and taste it, but it is the first time I've had fruit off the plant, and I'll make some decisions now based on what it's like and how much fruit I get as to whether I keep that plant in there. Time will tell. The fruit garden are well and truly over now, and all the focus from the plants is going into these large and tall stems, and they will be the stems that bear next year's fruit. And so it's important to let them establish, and they're certainly establishing. coming across the path. I will need to make some root through here, but again the bindweed in here is just excessive, and it's a job for me in the future to work out how best to manage that. But fruit wise, it's over in here, and it's all now about how I get it prepared during the winter and into next year. My strawberry runners I potted up, and I've left them there because the shade of this tree has been doing a great job of work, making sure they don't get dried out. And as we get rain, it also means that we get a bit of exposure to rain, which keeps them damp, and that's perfect conditions for them to grow on. And I can see some of the younger leaves starting to sort of make progress, which is a good sign, and they should be reasonably well established plants by the time the winter comes. And finally on the plot is the squash and pumpkin area, and I've added a couple more squash where we had some failures, but generally these are now well underway, and it's just a race now, hoping that we get reasonably good weather so that the growing conditions are right and we get the fruit that we need. And early signs are good. I noticed this morning that this looks like it's going to be a banana pumpkin, or squash rather, and we're getting that characteristic long shape, so that's encouraging. We're getting a little bit of dieback on some of these fruits. You can see that one has got a brown end. I don't know whether that's going to come through or not, but we'll see, time will tell. And the runners now are starting to come across the path, and it wouldn't be a problem if this whole area ended up being covered by runners and pumpkins and squash. That's what this open area is designed for. So at the moment I'm hopeful that it'll be a good season. The strawberry plants over here on the left in the pots, they're strong, but we haven't had a lot of fruit from them. I notice there's a few new flowers on them, but I'm not convinced I'm going to carry on growing those next year. I might take some of the runners because there's plenty of runners coming off of them, and that'll just underpin what I've already gathered from within the polytunnel. The Jerusalem artichoke starting to die back in this heat it's had over the last few days. It's not got a great deal of moisture in that pot, but it's one of those plants that if you put it in the ground you'll regret it, because it just keeps going and going and you never really get it out of the ground. Next to it, the horseradish. I'm hopeful that I'll be able to take some root from that this year, make some horseradish sauce. We'll see. Certainly the leaves are looking a good size. So that's the plot. It's about 7 o'clock in the morning. It's quiet and the sun is just starting to hit the peaks on the other side of the valley. It's peaceful, and I'll sign off and wish you all the best for the rest of the week.